For those, anybody in here not know who Keith French is yet? I think he's spoken to pretty much everybody in here. Keith is our partner in Baltimore. We've really forged a fantastic relationship together with him. Blue Star Property Management and the group that they're with, they're a lot of the backbone for what we've put together with the vacancy to value and getting introduced to Mr. Braverman and all the great things that are happening here. So I wanted to bring him up here, give him a little opportunity. He's going to introduce Chris and talk to you a couple follow-up things with what Michael had just mentioned.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, first of all. I know a lot of people out in the crowd here today, meet a lot of people out on the streets. You guys, usually I'm standing out on like a street corner somewhere talking to everybody and waving my arms and stuff. Anyway, I'm glad everybody came out. It really shows a commitment to Baltimore. For those of you that know me or who have talked to me, I think you guys know that I have a real passion for the city, a passion for investment. You know, I practice what I preach. I'm here, and the reason why I'm here and the reason why we're talking about vacancy to value is because we're involved with this program. We are heavily invested in certainly in some of these areas that Michael was talking about. So we're here with you. You know, I'm standing here as a fellow investor, and I have, you know, hopefully the same passion that everybody else has within this room to, number one, make Baltimore a better city, but also make money at it, you know, let's face it, along the way. I appreciate Michael's efforts. We've had a really good relationship with Michael's office, you know, throughout the last couple of years. I've all said this, and I don't know, is he still here? Is Mike still here? Okay. We all say this, and it's really easy to say, you know, and I don't say it just because he's here, but Michael's one of the smart people in the city, okay? We all get frustrated, you know, we've all had these fines and code enforcement actions, and any of us that own property in Baltimore City know that there's some frustration along the way. But Michael is definitely one of the good people and someone who really has the best interests of the city in heart, and also understands how to get to that the point of making the city a better spot, better place to live, better place to invest. We realized a long time ago that you need partners out there. You need public partners, you need private partners, you need some nonprofit partners. You can't do it alone. And prior to Michael's leadership and prior to our getting involved in the investing on a large scale, like we're talking here, there was, you know, different factions. The city was over here working, the private sector was over here working, and the nonprofits were over somewhere else working. Now we've been fortunate enough to bring those three sectors together and really make a difference, and we really feel good about these partnerships. We found out, and I've talked to you guys a lot about this, and some of you guys have seen me talk before about the same subject. Vacancy to value is the mayor's initiative, but before it was vacancy to value, you know, the Baltimore City, as you can see from the slideshow, has a real issue with vacant properties. They don't have enough people to live in them, and people don't want to live in certain areas. So you have to eliminate housing. You know, you have to have the idea that, you know what, you can't rehab everything. Let's just eliminate stuff. You start eliminating housing, it starts bringing up the housing value that's in the city, okay? You have to have a strategic, a strategic outcome and a situation where, you know, you have all your pistons working at the same time. I mean, where, you know, you have the public sector here, the private sector here, and the nonprofit sector here, and they're all working in synergy together to achieve that goal. We found out, and we found out the hard way, and I tell this story to a lot of people. You know, a lot of people come up to me and they call us on the phone and say, hey, we want to invest in Baltimore. We want to buy a whole city block. And I always say, no, you don't. You don't want to buy a whole city block. Oh, yeah, we do. We want to own a whole block. No, we own a whole block, and it was a disaster, and that's how we ended up in this program. What we want to do is we want to control 6 or 7 blocks with 6 or 7 different people. We want to put together a community plan, you know, not just one-off in investing, okay? Look at the difference that we've made in Lorraine and Whitridge and that Harwood community. I mean, just a few people in this room, the folks that just came up here and took a picture, we've made a significant difference in that community alone. So we've learned some lessons, when we started building out the whole block concept, we met Michael. And the reason why we met Michael is because we were getting killed with citations, fines, and finally we climbed our way up the ladder and got to the smart guy. We were very fortunate. So through that relationship, we'd start discussing how we can strategically invest and strategically work within the city, and we came up with this program. One of the stops that we're going to make tomorrow is in a community called Duncan Square. It's a community that is, I don't have a pointer. Can you point that out, Chris? That's the Duncan Square community. Okay. Right in here. So you can see where it's located. This is Hopkins. This is the big gorilla in the room. And this is Patterson Park in a very stable neighborhood, Butchers Hill in the Patterson Park neighborhood. So we're here in Duncan Square. And we named the neighborhood. We're kind of branding this neighborhood. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow in some of the breakout sessions. But what we did, we went out and found nonprofit partners, partnered with the city, of course, in order to get a hold of all the vacants in that footprint. We defined the footprint. We went out and we had a critical mass. We controlled, I think, 10 or 12 properties in that footprint before we even started, okay? We controlled the real estate, in a critical mass in this area, and we had a plan. Today we control, I think, 19 properties, Chris? 19 properties out of 40-some vacants, is that correct? And we have a plan for the rest of the vacants. So we're developing a concept in which we identified an area and we said we're not going to have any vacants in this whole area. When we get done, there's not going to be any vacants. Well, how do we do that? We work with the city. The city comes in and they guarantee us that they're going to do code enforcement and either A, make a person rehab the property, or B, they're going to have to sell it, or it's going to go in the receivership program. So there's all kind of different partnerships in place here to make sure that that particular block or set of blocks is going to be 100% rehab. I just mentioned Chris Ryer is the president of Southeast CDC. They are one of our nonprofit partners. They do a lot of good work in the city, a very strong community development corporation. With that, I'm going to introduce Chris and let him talk a little bit about our partnership. Chris Ryer.
All right, thank you. Welcome to Baltimore. I wanted to maybe explain a little bit about who we are and how we got here, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Like you, my parents were from Baltimore County. I left here when I was 10 years old, and I didn't come back for 20 years after that. And believe it or not, I moved back to Baltimore from San Diego, California, which is arguably one of the most beautiful cities in the world. But I had decided I wanted to be a city planner, and if you wanted to be a city planner in North America, you wanted to be a city planner in Baltimore. And that's exactly what I did. I came back here and went to graduate school, and then I became a neighborhood planner for the Baltimore City Planning Department for 10 years. And what I learned there was that one of the most unique things about this town was how one person could make a difference. And I've proved that in my own career here over and over and over again. One person can make a huge difference in Baltimore. We are not New York, we are not Philadelphia, we are not Chicago, we are not LA. One person can do an incredible amount in Baltimore. So I left the city after 10 years, that was plenty, and went to a community development corporation on the southwest side of town. It's a great neighborhood. It's known by the name of Pigtown. When you try marketing Pigtown, that was quite a challenge, but we did, and it was a successful neighborhood. And then in the late 90s, some things really changed in Baltimore. Two things changed, really. On the political front, Martin O'Malley became mayor, was elected mayor, and he had a whole different approach to government. than his predecessors. And secondly, in the community development field, which I had become a part of, I'd shifted from city planning to community development. All of us, all across the country, all different cities and counties and governments, had come to the realization that we would never have enough resources to do what we wanted to do. And so the entire field of community development switched to something what we called strength-based or asset-based community development. So we all began to shift to work on the edges of good areas where we knew investment could make a difference. And that investment could be recirculated back into our work and back into our community. So that was a sea change in community development in Baltimore and in other places, but I think in Baltimore we've made that switch much more aggressively than in other cities. And our metrics for investment now are much more financial than they used to be. So the Southeast Community Development Corporation is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, community development corporations in Baltimore City, and by far it is the wealthiest and the most stable. I'm a midlife guy with kids in college and a mortgage and everything else, and if you think I'd go to a fly-by-night community development corporation that didn't know how it's going to pay its bills next year, I can't do that. Maybe a younger person could do it, but I can't. But we have substantial reserves, unlike most community development corporations, and a 30-year track record. We were started back in the late 60s and early 70s by a coalition of community groups and churches in Southeast Baltimore that wanted to spur investment in their neighborhoods and also to capture the profit from that investment. And that is what we've been doing for 30 years. The first 20 years, under the old system, we built affordable housing with government subsidies. That's what we do. We churned them out. We churn out 20 or 30 houses a year. It was a formula. We got a certain amount of subsidy. We used a second mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. And that is what we did until the late 1990s. Then those subsidies dried up. Remember when I talked about asset-based or strength-based community development? Those subsidies were gone. Some came from the federal government, some came from the state government, some came directly from the city government, but they were no longer enough to make a difference. We could not accomplish our goal of transforming neighborhoods through subsidy anymore. So we, along with most CDCs that are still around and are effective, shifted to an asset-based approach. At that point, I went back to the city government. Martin O'Malley was elected, and I became the deputy director of the city planning department. And we were able, at the city planning level, to identify neighborhoods that were attracting private investment and do what we needed to do to make sure that that investment was successful. So one of the reasons why I'm here is because being on both sides of the fence, I understand the magnitude of what Michael Braverman, who is a deputy housing commissioner in the housing board, has accomplished. He has accomplished in the last 3 or 4 years some amazing streamlining and rationalization of the code enforcement process. It works now. It really was a cumbersome, difficult tool. It was not something you could depend on before, and now it works in Baltimore City. And you just saw Michael. He's a quiet, unassuming guy. He's not out there bragging about but what he has done is truly phenomenal in the city. So we were attracted. So I'm the director of a CDC in Southeast Baltimore. We're basically our boundaries go up to Route 40, down to the waterfront. And they go from downtown over to the Baltimore County line. And I'm pleased to hear a lot of you know these neighborhoods in Baltimore. And as a CDC, we know the neighborhoods. I know these neighborhoods extremely well. I have a mental picture of every block just about in Southeast Baltimore. And we knew where the strengths were and we knew where the weaknesses were. And for 3 years, through the real estate meltdown and all that, we've been trying to figure out how to change the market, the residential housing market of the area north of Patterson Park. And voila, we ran into Keith one day. Keith just happened to be building a new office building right down the street from my office building. That was a pure coincidence, entirely coincident. We happened to be on the same block. We could walk back and forth to each other's offices today. But he was investing in the area we were concerned about. So we went with Keith, and then I found out about what Braverman had been doing with Keith in the years since I had left city government. And it was phenomenal. There were two things going on. One was that the city had these incredible new tools, and the second was Keith had the right block. And we stepped up. They were trying to incubate or whatever, grow this new program. Didn't even have a name at that point, but now it's called Vacants to Value. But we had the best block. We had what we call Duncan Square. That's why it's in front of you tonight. Duncan Square, if you know Baltimore, it sounds like a lot of you do, is right next to a neighborhood of Butchers Hill where houses routinely sell for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and you can throw a rock and hit the new $1 billion Hopkins Children's Tower and Main Hospital Tower. I mean, if there is any block that's on the edge of everything in Southeast Baltimore, it's this block. So we were blown away. We were totally blown away. The more we dug, the more we realized there was a larger strategy here. And then we met a community group, and they were engaged, and they were positive, and they wanted to work with us. And the whole thing has begun to snowball, so we're no longer looking at Duncan Square. We have assembled, I believe on that team, as a partnership between the nonprofit and the for-profit. We've assembled half of the vacant properties on the block. Another investor is taking another 25%, so we'll be working with Michael on the remaining 25%. That's all that's left. We've been able, as a nonprofit, to receive funds from banks to build the model home, from foundations to fix up the vacant lots and make them parks. Where hopefully the city will be putting in off-street parking for us. Another organization will be giving us marketing funds. We'll be doing some really non-traditional marketing. We'll be marketing to these sort of cutting-edge young people in some cases that might go into a neighborhood that they couldn't afford the neighborhood right next to it. They could walk to Hopkins. And they are willing to believe in us because we're doing the entire block or the entire area. So we've been able to assemble all these other tools to support this neighborhood, and now we're looking around and meeting people like you and starting to think we can do the next block and the block after that. And why the president of Hopkins now wants to meet with us and take a tour of the neighborhood. And the mayor is suddenly rolling out this huge program, and all these wonderful things are happening. So my job is to undo a little bit of the work Michael did. He's not here to defend himself. My job is to convince you to work in Southeast Baltimore. Michael, I don't have to worry about the whole city anymore. I just have to worry about Southeast Baltimore. So that's what I'm leading up to. We're really interested in, and as you can see, that the city and hopefully the private market is really interested in this area around Johns Hopkins Hospital. It's the largest employer. The hospital itself is the largest employer in the city, and the Hopkins system, which includes the university and the APL laboratory in Howard County, is the largest employer in Maryland. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And any of you from Philadelphia that have followed what Penn has been doing in West Philly, not a lot, but the head of Hopkins comes from that environment. They are starting to think holistically about the communities around them, and we're very excited by the sort of waking of the sleeping giant in Southeast Baltimore. So in front of me here are some blow-ups of our project, our immediate project, which is fully funded right now and about to break construction. It's called Duncan Square. And I hope you can see from this map, or maybe you can come up later on that board over there. These private investors working with Michael Braverman have identified a dozen or maybe 15 other areas, about half of which are in and around the General Hopkins Hospital area, where through coordinated investment and coordinated code enforcement, we can change a block or even change a neighborhood. So that's my spiel about Baltimore. I want to welcome you again and invite you to look around tomorrow if you get a chance. Look at the areas around the park. Michael was telling me, Patterson Park, if you know that. I mean, on the south side of Patterson Park, I was working in that neighborhood in the 1980s when, I mean, you couldn't give a row house away for $30,000 or $40,000, and Canton now routinely sells $400,000 to $600,000 if you're close by the water, and $200,000 to $300,000 to $400,000 if you're close to the park. I mean, a more than tenfold increase in a 20-year period. It's a vibrant, lively neighborhood. So with that, I want to thank you for coming to Baltimore, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.